Welcome to Sandbox FOMO5 from Buro Happold. Each week we pick short snippets from our most recent episode for your listening pleasure. These quick listens could be valuable insights, thought-provoking elements, or even practical advice that will no doubt enrich your life and knowledge. Sandbox brings together curious individuals interested in a specific topic to discuss, dissect, and interrogate it. The style is conversational, with experts from Buro Happold and invited external guests who will add another angle to the narrative. Listeners are encouraged to gather around our podcast so that we can explore the latest advances in various fields and expand our collective horizons. Sometimes we'll tackle a subject head-on, sometimes a sideways view, but always with curiosity, expertise, and who knows, maybe even a dash of humour. In terms of the current state of investment in infrastructure, where do you think we're standing with that?
I think that there's been different approaches taken in different sectors. So if you look in the power sector, the regulator, Ofgem, has taken an increasingly more long-term view. The problem with critical national infrastructure, a lot of it is you could stop all spending like next year. So we've all seen power lines running across fields and going through woods. You need to cut the trees. You could stop all tree cutting next year and not have a problem. The year after, you wouldn't have a problem. Maybe not the year after that. But at some point, you've got trees everywhere, the wind blows and everything falls down. And that's been the problem with utility critical national infrastructure, is because water pipes last for like over 100 years. So spending in the short term is hard to measure. And in power, I think a lot of work's been done about asset condition and asset health and ensuring that the network overall has got a good health, as well as providing the capacity that's required. I think with water, that hasn't happened. With water, the imperative for the regulator was to keep bills down. And I think the fact that there have been no new reservoirs in the last 30 years since privatisation, the first ones going in Portsmouth, down in Havant, sort of tells a story. The UK population has gone up by 10, 20 million in that time. We haven't built any reservoirs. And that's a long-term investment. So I think that it's different sectors. So I think power sector, has looked at the long-term approach and the investment and what's needed, whereas water, I think, has taken a more short-term approach. And that's why we're seeing all the stories, and all the questions in the media about pollution and water bills and where we're going, I think is a result of that lack of investment since 1990.
Right, I see. When you think about, the person on the street, your average Joe like me, the social media pages of the town where I live, they get very exercised about the state of, say, the roads in our town. We've even had a national tabloid newspaper come up and they ran a photo story with one of the residents using the potholes in the road as a makeshift mini golf course. My questions to the panel are, what are the impacts of ageing and or poorly maintained infrastructure, and in what way are the different sections of society affected, and from the person on the potholed streets all the way up to big business? And I'm thinking here about well-being and livability, health, safety, daily quality of life. Chris, what are your thoughts about the impact on elements of society?
Like I was talking about with tree cutting with power lines, potholes is a good example. You don't spend enough money on potholes in year one. No one notices. You get to where we are now, where, the backlog is, hundreds of years, millions of pounds. And, there's questions about whether we've got resources to get that repaired within a reasonable timescale and a reasonable cost. That's, for me, is a good example of making sure you've got that asset stewardship where you're maintaining the proper asset health, whether that's road. Rails is another good example where, we've seen stuff in the past with lack of investment in the rails, whether that's, in the autumn, keeping leaves off the line, which you think is really simple, but has, major impact on the man in the street when all the trains are being cancelled, and leaves on the line, not a very good message. That for me is a good example of where a modest amount of spend on an annual basis keeps everything running, whereas saving that money really creates a much disproportionately larger problem later on down the line. And that's where this whole approach to critical national infrastructure, has to make sure that sufficient funds are allowed and sufficient intelligence applied to put that spend in the right place, because you don't just throw money at it.
Yeah.
You want to put it into an area that, like a pothole in the road, is a discernible benefit to the man in the street.
It's interesting that leaves on the line has become such a profound shorthand for infrastructural breakdowns, let's say. Paula, what are your thoughts on the impacts of underfunding of infrastructure or failings of infrastructure on Joe Public and beyond?
So whether it's potholes or track buckling due to heat, I was reading a paper recently that said in 2024, within the 240 days in the calendar year where there was train disruption of some sort due to buckling rail lines or due to overhead power lines being overstretched, all associated with some sort of weather condition. And I think increasingly that impact is going to affect people, society, economic growth, and well-being of our people and children. There are so many children that are impacted by not being able to reach education due to disruption to transportation. And those of us living in urban areas where we might have different ways of getting to places might not understand that, but actually a tree down on your local urban road in Wales means you're not getting to school. So which takes us back to the point of resilience. Not only we have great impacts now on society on different dimensions, that impact is going to evolve and change as we face more dramatic climate risk, terror risk, other types of risk. So I think governments and industries and professionals have a real onerous task to think through how these things will evolve, what the impact will be on societies, and try to solution and work with the asset operator, whether it's National Highways Safer Roads or it's Network Rail for rail, to come up proactively with ideas to minimize this disruption, because the impact of that is very, very negative at all levels.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that quick dip into our last episode of Sandbox. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the show. You'll find Sandbox in all the usual places, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Buro Happold's YouTube channel, and on the Buro Happold website. What's more, if you want to join the conversation on X, known as Twitter to its old friends, use the hashtag BHSandbox. We'd love to hear from you on any of the topics discussed.